Okay, we now enter one of our longest and most popular pieces, the part about innate personality, the personality we were born with. And here to emphasize this, we have a picture of a baby, and over here we have young babies innately following mama through the water. I'm going to do three completely different topics here within this. First is you're going to find your own innate personality and how it affects your own behaviors. We're going to look at your team and how it matches to the work you have to do, the context you're in, and how it influences the fifth force. And then we're going to look at the really important piece of becoming 4D able, how we chart and manage that. That's our game plan here. So there are four personality foundations. This goes right back to the Jungian work again that I talked about before. The cultivating leader cares most about people. It's natural for them. There's the growing of people idea in the green again. The including leaders care most about relationships. And by the way, they are very potent and powerful team leaders, as are the greens, because people like to follow people who care about them and care about how they relate with them. The blue visioning leaders are into ideas. Their most difficult, by the way, this is interesting, the most difficult thing is across the diagonal. So why is that? If I'm a blue leader and I care most about my intuitive information and my logical thinking, I care least about emotional decision-making and sensed data. So for the blue leader, which I can speak authoritatively to because I am, the human relationship is something I've had to work on for some years. The orange leader is process-oriented. I think if they had a mantra, it would be plan the work the plan. By the way, these people are really good at closing out late-phase projects, anything that needs this management and process control. This is their deal. And by the way, these people are most of the CEOs of the companies in the world are these people, because most businesses thrive and survive on producing high quality, high value products at low cost. Okay. So at this point, instruct participants to write their name on their workbook cover, and you can tell them there's two reasons for this. One reason is that they're going to have valuable information in there, and they want to get their name on it so it doesn't fall into someone else's hands. And the second is we're going to do this little experiment. The step two is to, with their other hand, write their name in any place, but there's a place on page 2 to do it. Then ask them what they notice. And people will talk about the fact that they notice that it's much more difficult to write with the other hand, that it's illegible. And so the point of this really is twofold. One is to draw an analogy between the innate preference we have for using one hand over the other for complex tasks. And I think most people will readily agree and understand this is certainly present at birth. In fact, they found a gene for it. But even a more interesting idea is I want to get you to start thinking about a terminology. If someone asks me, am I right-handed or left-handed, I don't say I'm 70% right-handed and 30% left-handed. I say that I'm right-handed. And we want you to use the same thought process and the same terminology for your innate personality. That if you ask me, am I what my personality foundation is, I'll say I'm a blue visioning leader. I don't want people to say I'm 70% blue and 30% green and something like that. So to introduce the binary technology and have them do this little exercise to give them a feeling for how this actually works as a born thing. So how do the processes work? The intuitor, as I said before, is an integration, an unconscious, I believe, integration of past experience. It tends to give great insights. It's a lot of what's called fast thinking is using intuition, using intuitive information. It's scattered, creative. You have a big picture perspective. The sensor is more like system 2. It's observant, organized, detail-oriented. And so let's look at a traffic accident, and the police shows up, and I encourage you to make up an example that uses the real location. I'll show you how to do that here. So I'm at home in my home office now, and the local highways, Foothills Ranch Drive intersects Nelson Road. So imagine you're driving down Foothills Ranch Drive and you see this accident occur. You pull off the road, and a few minutes later the police show up, and the policeman asks what happened. The sensor would say, well, I saw this car coming out of Nelson. He's moving pretty fast. He looks like he makes a decision to turn right without stopping, even though he's supposed to, because he thinks there's a clear lane for him to turn into. This guy's coming down the road at over the speed limit, 70 miles an hour or 120 kilometers. I see him look out the window and be fascinated by this llama farm this nearby, which is really true for where I live. There's llamas, buffaloes. He looks off to the side. He imagines the car coming out of Nelson Road is not going to turn, but going to stop. Smashes into him on the left quarter, spins around 270 degrees. So the policeman's very happy, writing down all these facts. He says to the intuitor, well, what did you see? The intuitor says, well, I saw the two cars smash, and you know, if you had a bigger stop sign there, we wouldn't have this problem, or you might say, in your example, if the lights were synchronized better, we wouldn't have this problem, and so forth. So make up a little story that's apropos to the situation and go through this example. The deciding process, the emotional deciding process, people take events personally. They use interpersonal values and emotions as criteria. I was strategic advisor to the dean of the business school when I was at the University of Colorado. He used to start faculty meetings saying, I want an outcome we can all feel good about. By the way, he was a yellow leader. He was perfect for that job because of all the disputes and problems the faculty had. And I'm hearing him say this, and I'm going, what's that got to do with anything? The logical deciders, we see events objectively, use rational values and thoughts as criteria. And so the emotional decider, I don't think I can explain it to you very well because I don't do it. But what I can tell you is there's a movie called Field of Dreams. And in there, he says over and over some version of, I don't understand it, it just feels right. That's a great example. With regard to the logical decider, I can do that quite well because that's what I do. So when I moved to Boulder in 1993, I decided to buy a house. And I was into thinking about this work back then, and the question I asked myself was, what is the process that I use to historically buy houses? And you can think about how you rent an apartment, or how you buy a car, or how you buy almost anything that requires some consideration and some consequence. And I realized I always bought houses using only logical criteria. So I would look at things like the rate of change of property values, the cost per square foot. In those early days, the scores of the schools where my kids would go, on and on and on. So I thought about that, and I said, now what was the outcome of that process? And what I realized, that using that process, I'd never bought a house I liked. So I said, Charlie, you're going to bat left-handed, you're going to write with the other hand, you're going to make this process using emotions. So I called a real estate agent in Boulder, and I told her the following. I said, when I come out to Boulder, we're going to get in your car, we're going to look at houses, and the first house that feels good, I'm buying it. I explained to her that I'm going to make emotional deciding, so because it's more important to me now to buy a house that I like than otherwise. So the third house, she was very happy. The third house we went into, I walked in the front door and I said, you know, this house feels good. I think I'll buy it. I bought the house. The house was fine. I later was congratulating myself on moving over and becoming an emotional decider, but I realized that's not what happened at all. I still went through all the logical things I always did, and all I did was permit myself to allow an emotional experience to plop into my logical train. And I really want you to think about how I languaged it. I said, this house feels good. I think I'll buy it. And so in a few minutes, we're going to have you do a similar exercise. We're going to put badges on you, and I will be noticing, as will your other facilitators, how you're languaging things, because it's really important. So we'll be looking for consistency between how you speak to things and what your badge says. So that's that. We're going to do a little inquiry. And you know, in writing test instruments like this, I find it very, very difficult to think of how to do this that you don't have to imagine some context to answer the question. So I'm going to suggest that when you answer this little test thing, you think about a context where you're most comfortable, most relaxed, most able to be your natural self. For some of you, it might be home, and some of you, it might be work. Now, Carl Jung said that our job in the first part of life is to build our personality on our innate foundation. And we all surely did that. In fact, he went on to say that if you don't do that, you'll be mentally ill with some form of schizophrenia. And then he said the job in the later part of life is to develop the other three dimensions. In the U.S., we call this midlife crisis. So it might be useful for you, especially if you're thinking about moving more to the emotional side and things of this sort. It might be useful for you to ask yourself, how would I answer this examination when I was, say, in my 20s? Because surely then we're all focused on our innate personality. Now, the choices are going to be difficult. Many of them are going to be close calls. Just do it quickly. We got many other tests of whether you've got the right badge on, so don't worry about it. And again, the more quickly you do it, the better, because the more time you take thinking about it, the more likely you're going to be trying to answer the way you want to be rather than who you innately really are. These are the questions, and I'll explain one or two. To the emotional decider, harmony in a group is really a good thing. I mean, it's a wonderful experience to be around these people all getting along. To the logical decider, harmony is okay, but it's a means to an end. It's a way to get to something. So that's the difference. Then the emotional decider prefers to act on what feels right, and the logical decider what's logical. And I've just checked the boxes here as how I would answer them. You notice there's an odd number, 7. So you have to end up with 4, 3, at least 4, 3. Pick whichever one's more, and don't worry about it, because you may get it even completely wrong, and we'll explore this in much more detail as we go. And again, you might want to change the verbs in here to harmony was intrinsically valuable on your own if you're looking at this earlier in life. Okay. A little coding sheet. For example, if you're an emotional decider and you're an intuitive information, innate preference, you're a green badge, and this is how the code works. Ask everyone to pick up their leader badge. You have to have these manufactured and ready for people before the workshop. And I recommend you put them on a chair or a table and put them in the align with the 4 dimensions. I think is the best way to do this. And then ask them to come write their name on the flip chart, team by team, so everyone can read it, and then to wear their badge so that they can all see it. The badges that I make for the U.S. actually are the size of a common badge that we use in business and government. And I actually encourage people after the workshop to put their badge, this badge, under their work badge, and they can have some fun with it. They can flip it up so people can look at it and can say, meet me where I live. So now let's study the charts, and let's ask, what is the optimal distribution for what the work you're doing? What is the context that you're immersed in, and how does your badge distribution support or limit your functioning in that context, your 5th force? So here's a case of a project team, and this I've made this kind of hypothetical, but you want to have mostly blue badges in here because the work is conceptual. Now, why not all blue badges? Well, you'd like to have some people there that can keep you back to the core values that matter most, some people in there that can model some good relationships, some people in there that can help you stay organized in process. And I call these people the architects. If I were going to build a building or a house or something, I would get the architects first, and I'd have them do studies of where you can move the lines around easily. You can make a wall a foot deeper or less, and so on. So this is the perfect distribution for that phase. And in projects, as you move into later phases, you get to the point where you need to move to completion. And you don't want anyone making a whole bunch of trade studies when you're in the construction phase, because it's going to raise the cost. So in this case, you want to have mostly these orange builders. And then over here, I show a team distribution that's fairly common. This would be a diverse, flexible team. And everything's not a project, so this would be a team that, if everybody's functioning four-dimensionally, would be fun to work with and be able to do a lot of things. So I walk around the room if it's multiple teams or work with the one team. If everybody think about whether the team's a good match, and if not, they should probably think about changing it. The common problem that I see is you get a project team that starts off this way, the team stays the same, they get into the late phase and they can't ever complete it. So there's the issues. So there's the badges, and this is going to end section 7, and I'll be back with you in a few minutes to continue section 8. Thank you for listening, and have a great day wherever you are.